All right, welcome. Welcome to the National Iron and Steel Heritage Museum. I'm the president, Scott Houston, and today we remember the 20th anniversary of September 11th through the Coatesville Remembers. We would like to ring bells at the 4 plane crashes and the 2 tower collapses, remembering the 2,977 people who passed away 20 years ago today. We will then have a moment of silence and musical reflections provided by the Lukens Band. We will also then have our distinguished guests make some comments as well, so looking forward to that. And we would like to thank the Coatesville Police Department, Chief Loeffler, and the Coatesville PD for being here today. But mostly want to take some time just to remember the events and really appreciate you being here today as we do that. We would like to remind everybody of the 343 firefighters and 60 police officers who gave their lives 20 years ago today. And we will then read the names of the Chester County residents who passed away at 10:30 at the end. And we just want to reflect on the time that changed our country 20 years ago. But without further ado, I think we're going to play the national anthem. So please rise for that, and then that will be followed by an opening prayer by Representative Dan Williams. Thank you.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, oh, the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof in the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave? Oh, the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Please remain standing. God our Father, we honor you on a day like today, a time to remember, a time to reflect. We pause to say thank you for the grace you've extended, the love we sense. We pause, Father, too, to say thank you for those who have given the ultimate sacrifice, their lives, for the sake of those of us who stand in this space. We pray, God, that you would continue to minister your grace towards those who continue to suffer. We pray, God, that you would be the comfort for families that over these many years have been fatherless, motherless, without sons, without daughters, without friends. And we pray, God, that as we spend this time reflecting on those sacrifices, that you remind us of the sacrifice we're called to make towards one another in terms of our humility, our patience, our love, and our care and concern for the other. Thank you again for moments to just pause and grant to you the grace and the thanks so rightly deserved. We pray this in the strong name of Jesus. Amen. You may be seated.
Thank you, Representative Williams, and thank you, Chief Pierce, for a beautiful rendition of our national anthem. At 8:46, hijackers deliberately crash American Airlines Flight 11, carrying 76 passengers, 11 crew members, into floors 94 through 98 of the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York. Please observe a moment of silence. At this point, we'd like to invite the Chester County Commissioners to give a few words. We have Marion Moskowitz, Josh Maxwell, and Michelle Kickline.
Good morning, everyone. The morning of September 11th, 2001, I woke to my normal routine. I was going to the office later than usual because I had work to do, and I wanted some quiet time to do it. No TV, no radio, just a quiet morning with my coffee and my paperwork. That morning, thousands of others were also going about their normal routine in New York City and in Washington, D.C., checking into flights at Logan Airport, Dulles Airport, and Newark Airport. We all remember where we were, what we were doing, and when we learned of the first Twin Tower crash, then the second tower, then the Pentagon, then the plane crash at Coatesville. But actually, on this 20th anniversary of 9/11, not all of us do remember, because nearly 1/5 of Americans are too young to remember firsthand, or weren't even born yet on the day America came under attack. For them, 9/11 is a subject learned secondhand. For them, understanding the events of that beautiful autumn day in 2001 comes from documentaries, dramatizations, TV, the movies and in photographs. And from the displays and the stories, the monuments and museums that memorialize 9/11. Just this week, NPR invited people who lost a loved one on 9/11 to leave a voicemail to the person they lost. Hey sis, it's Sam. You have 20 years. We will never forget you. Hey Jimmy, I miss you so much. The boys are amazing. You would be so proud. One of the lasting impressions of 9/11 attacks for me and for many people is the actions and the courage of our first responders. Those who were heading into the towers as others were desperate to get out. Firefighters, law enforcement officers, EMTs who were in rescue mode, no matter what the circumstance or the danger. The bravery of our first responders, men and women who didn't give their actions a second thought, made them true heroes. These are the people I will never forget. The 9/11 attack left us feeling hopeless, filled with despair, sadness for the violent deaths, and the images witnessed by families and friends and fellow Americans. But in reflecting upon the full events of that day 20 years ago, I believe that we should choose to remember and focus on the stories of hope, of resilience, of bravery, and of unity. And in doing so, we help the next generation learn the lessons of September 11th, 2001, and we truly honor those who sacrificed in the attack. Thank you. I'll turn it over to Commissioner Maxwell.
Good morning. It is an honor to be with all of you here on this very important occasion. We were asked to share some remarks about our experiences of 9/11 and what we remember, and I would encourage you as we do so to remember where you were that morning, as if waking up this morning prevented you from doing that in any way. If you're like me, your mind's been thinking about this day all week, watching our emergency responders go out and save lives in Coatesville and Downingtown and Avondale and across Chester County. And thinking about memorializing the folks that we lost on 9/11. I was in high school on 9/11. It was my senior year, Downingtown High School, second period, and the teacher had turned on the TV and said, "We're not having class today. We're gonna watch the news." And so we sat in our class in our normal positions and watched as these reporters started calling out what was happening behind them. I didn't understand what was going on. I'd never seen a traumatic international event live before. I was familiar with the Gulf War. I'd watched uncles and folks like that go overseas to fight in that war, but it didn't really register with me as an adult yet. But then one of the reporters was on TV, and behind her there was a crash, and she was surrounded by debris. And she said, "Oh my goodness, another plane had just hit one of the towers." What she didn't know, that the viewers knew moments after, is that one of the buildings had fallen behind her. And then that this vacant space was behind her that had stood as an example of American achievement for so long. And I watched and I realized that this is what my grandparents told me about Pearl Harbor. This was a moment in my life that I'm going to remember forever. This is going to be a moment where our country makes a decision about who we are. The person next to me in my class left. He was 18, he said, "I'm joining the Army." And he walked out of school and left that day to join the Army. When we got home, hugged my mom, who was upset, and started to follow along about what was going on to try and figure out what as a community we can do to help. But what I learned about my community and learned about my country that week, going to school a couple days later, was seeing all the American flags up in every town in America, including my own. We were united as we had ever seen, and more than I could ever even imagine at that moment. And that's one of my biggest takeaways from that, is as much as we have disagreements, when it really comes push to shove here in this country, we're focused on what we can do together to overcome what we need to as a country, as a community, as all of us. So I just want to be with you today and echo what our Chair Marian Moskowitz has mentioned, in that today we're going to remember our heroes, and thank them every single day for what they do to save lives in our police, our fire department, and our military. And make sure that we always remember what we can do as a country when we're united and working towards a common goal, because we know what we can accomplish. So thank you all very, very much.
Good morning. 20 years, one generation. I remember that day like it was yesterday. I was a young mother. I had a baby boy. I was home on maternity leave, and my daughter had just started preschool. I had strapped my son into his baby seat and my daughter into her booster, and I drove them to her preschool to start her very first day of school. For some reason, I had the radio on that day, and as I was driving my son home for his feeding, I heard that a small plane, that's what they said at that moment, a small plane had crashed into the World Trade Center. So I came home with my baby boy, and I turned on the television. And as I fed him, I watched with horror, like so many of you that day, the second plane hit the second World Trade Center. My husband has family in northern Jersey, in Long Island. We rushed to the phones that day to see and to find out, was Jimmy okay? Was Susan all right? Did they go to work? They worked in the World Trade Center. Like so many of us in this country, we were touched by that moment. And we had so many stories, like so many in this country, of people that had a doctor's appointment that day, that changed their plans. And we were relieved, but there were thousands, tens of thousands of people that didn't hear those stories, that lost a loved one. And so many things have changed since that day. We no longer can just walk into an airport. We use words like TSA and pre-check. We know what Homeland Security is. My kids grew up learning to take off their shoes to walk into an airplane. We've changed the ways we relate to each other, some good and some bad. It's changed our journalism. It's changed our politics. It's changed the movies we watch and the music we listen to. And it's changed the way we appreciate our first responders, those men and women that strapped 75 pounds on their back and walked up hundreds of steps in ash, in smoke that day to save people, and many who died that day. And that is one of the reasons I know as a county commissioner, we were so supportive of our state-of-the-art public training facility here in Coatesville, because 9/11 made us appreciate what those men and women have to endure so that we can be safe. The other day, it was just yesterday, I was asked to speak at many schools in the area, and one was just up the hill at East Fallowfield Elementary. And I mentioned to Representative Williams, I was struggling. How do I speak to children about this event? How do I speak to them without scaring them? How do I speak to them about lessons that we learned? And I remember a story from that day because I stood there and I saw a teacher standing with our children. He happened to have a New York Yankees hat on, and he had a bandana on his face because we're in COVID. And I remember a story about a young man who was 23 years old on September 11th. His name was Wells Crother. And nobody knew who he was that day. They didn't know his name until later. But if you remember, there was pictures and there were stories of a young man. He's 23 years old. That's how old my daughter is right now. He wore a bandana and he went back and forth multiple times to rescue 15 people that day. He was just an office worker. and he sacrificed his life for 15 people that day. So that was the story I shared with the children yesterday. That's the lessons we learned from this. The lessons that an average person, a young person like Wells Crowther, can make a difference, can touch us. And that 20 years later, one generation later, we have an obligation to our children to teach them how to make a difference, how to touch someone in their community, whether it's something as big as saving a life or feeding somebody that's hungry or going out and helping somebody clean out their house after a flood. That's the lesson of 9/11. And let's remember this quote as we leave today. Courage comes from love. There is a big unseen current of love that runs through the world, and some plug into it more than others, more deeply and surely. The grief of 9/11 still feels fresh today, but let's remember this love.
At 9:03, hijackers deliberately crash United Airlines Flight 175, carrying 51 passengers, 9 crew members, into floors 78 through 84 of the South Tower of the World Trade Center in New York. Please observe a moment of silence.
Very little was the
We'd like to welcome U.S. Representative Chrissy Houlihan, State Senator Carolyn Committa, and State Representative Dan Williams to give a few remarks.
Good morning, everyone. And I'm really, really grateful to be here today on such a beautiful day, so reminiscent of the day 20 years ago that we all are sharing and reflecting upon today. And thank you, Jim, and to the organizers for honoring this day and giving us the opportunity to speak and share with one another. And like many who have spoken before me, I've been ruminating for quite a long time before now on the 20th anniversary of 9/11 and what it means to me. Like so many of you, this day is one that can never and will never be just another square on the calendar, no matter how many years are passing. This year, of course, is slightly different for us all because it carries and marks the 20th anniversary, which bears an even heavier weight on my heart. And from my conversations with friends and with family, I know clearly that I'm not the only one who feels this way. Whenever I struggle with the memories and implications of this day, I find solace in remembering the image that I hold in my mind's eye, no matter where I am, of this enormous piece of Lukens Steel that is here on these grounds. Adding to this image is the fact that my husband comes from the Midwest, and his mom is a true Midwesterner, complete with wholesome colloquial and biblical references to people. She would always say, and does always say, "You are the salt of the earth, and you are as strong as blue twisted steel." So I hold her words and this image of this piece of history here in Coatesville in my heart wherever I am, and I soldier on. We are the salt of the earth. We are blue twisted steel. 20 years ago, the images of the Twin Towers, Shanksville, the Pentagon reverberated around the world. But beyond the images of iconic buildings and lush fields in Pennsylvania are other images that also stay in our collective memories. We remember the faces of the heroes of Flight 93. We remember the workers who rushed out of their everyday lives with clothes covered in ash and faces crusted with soot. And we remember the first responders who, without hesitation, rushed into harm's way to save many. And we remember our common humanity and our shared loss. I invite all of us to pause for another moment to think about how you felt that day. I know many of us have shared our experiences. For me, I remember thinking vividly about my small children who were in school, not quite old enough to understand why teachers were crying and kids were going home early. I remember standing in shock with my coworkers and trying to process the very clear realization that our lives would forever change at that moment in time. A grieving mother once told me that pain is sometimes worse as the years go by, not because the loss is still raw, but because the shared memories that we have of our community and our country fade into the background, and many feel lost or forgotten in their remaining personal memories. So I know some of you stand here today around our Commonwealth and beyond who have lost loved ones. They haven't forgotten, you haven't forgotten, and you cannot forget those profound personal memories. You don't get to forget your kitchen table isn't full at Thanksgiving. You don't get to forget why that last photo that you might have with your dad is before you were tall enough to go on the rides at Dorney Park. And you don't get to forget how much you wish your loved one were here to help the community heal at a moment like this. We lost some of the best of America that day. We lost 2,977 people, 412 of whom were first responders. 412. And we also lost 7,057 to the War on Terror in the 20 years since, and many, many more to death by suicide related to all of these events. And with each and every one of these lives lost, loved ones have struggled with these very same personal challenges and memories. In the days that followed September 11th, we came together and we said, never forget. Importantly, those are not just words. Never forget is a call to action. So today I'd like to talk about answering that call in this new phase of the observance of that horrible day 20 years ago. I call on us to serve one another. People have asked me why I'm so passionate about encouraging others to serve our country, both in or out of uniform, when it seems clearly that we're so fractured and that we have so much work to be done on a more perfect union. And to that question, I find an answer in the words of poet Amanda Gorman. She says, "We are not a nation broken, but a nation simply unfinished." It still gives me chills to repeat those words because it's so fitting on a day like today. She continues that even as we grieved, we grew, that even as we hurt, we hoped. For those who went fearlessly towards the towers, answering a call, who believed in a community worth fighting for, I wish they were here today to help us find our way. But they are here in the spirit that lives through so many of us right here in Coatesville. Those who continue to answer the call. When historic flooding devastated this community, our first responders answered that call. When we needed to treat those affected by this virus, our medical professionals answered the call. When our students needed to learn under very difficult and new circumstances, our educators answered that call. So please let us remember the legacy that we carry with us here in Coatesville and in this broader community. A city and a place with a storied history, a place that forged blue twisted steel and that still now forges a new beginning for many. Our community, time and time again, comes together and supports one another. The salvaged steel from the Twin Towers is a reminder of what was built and what destruction was attempted. But what remains is what matters. We are the salt of the earth, and our hope and our willingness to serve will pull us through. Our work is not done, and our resolve is strong. And each and every one of us has the ability to serve and to help heal this nation in some way, big or small, and I challenge each and every one of us to do that. So as we remember that day, that infamous day 20 years ago, please let us continue to honor the memory of our fallen, all of our fallen Americans, by being our better selves and by never tiring of answering that call to serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman Houlihan, and our county commissioners. There are many, many commemorations today, and our commissioners will be going to another event, as will I, and as will Congresswoman Houlihan. Good morning, friends. I'm State Senator Carolyn Committa, and I am so proud and delighted to be serving the people of Coatesville in the Pennsylvania Senate, and I am deeply honored to be here with you today. As I was coming in, I had a chance to say hello and shake hands with many of the police officers, and I didn't get to say hello to some of the firefighters here. And I just wanted to say that as former mayor of Westchester, I had the opportunity to work closely for 12 years with the police and firefighters in Westchester, and I got to meet some of them beyond my borough. And I want to tell you, in thinking about today and honoring the first responders who gave their lives trying to save the lives and saving the lives of many on 9/11 in the World Trade Center. We think about how do we honor those people. And I look at the first responders here today and I say, the best way we can honor and remember those who died on 9/11, 2001, is to honor, support, and thank the first responders who are here today and those who serve our community 24/7, 365 days a year. And to think about how they connect us to those first responders who gave their lives on 9/11. these first responders are here and ready to give their life for you today. And they know that. And they don't know when they go to work each day what they will encounter, and neither did the first responders or the workers in the World Trade Center who went to work that day. I also want to highlight, as Congresswoman Houlihan did, some of the citizens and people who helped other people who weren't trained first responders, who were there to help. And there are people like Jen Daywalt, who is the president of Modena Borough Council, volunteer, elected volunteer, who in recent floods, June 8th, last week, is giving hours and hours and hours of her time to help her neighbors. And this is the message that we take from 9/11/2001 to 9/11/2021. And so those were my initial thoughts that I wanted to share with you. Lift up the first responders, lift up the volunteers and your neighbors who are there. We saw everyone helping each other in Coatesville and Downingtown, Phoenixville, Avondale, and beyond in the recent floods. This is who we are. And I want to thank the National Iron and Steel Heritage Museum and all of the sponsors who made today's ceremony possible. It's so moving, it's so beautiful. Seeing these steel tridents in person, one cannot help but be struck by the significance of that day. And standing next to them in the shadows, you can't help but reflect on the enormity of the loss. As we mark the 20th anniversary of September 11th attacks, today my thoughts are not that far away from where we were 2 decades ago. I think of the victims and their families. I think of all those who are serving and have served in the defense of our nation. And I think of the emergency first responders who gave their lives and those who serve us today. Today and always, we honor them for all their courage, their service, and their sacrifice. September 11th was a turning point for our nation and for the world. But it was also a reminder of the strength of our common bonds, a reminder of what it means to be an American. Back then, we came together as never before. Back then, the rallying cry was, "United we stand." You saw it on banners, bumper stickers, flags. And there was no greater source of pride, no greater source of strength and hope than our emergency first responders. Today, these tridents, made here in Coatesville, Lukens Steel, stand as a testament to history, as a memorial to all those we've lost, and as a reminder of what we can withstand when we are united as one. Remember, as Chester Countyans, Pennsylvanians, and Americans, we have faced significant struggles since September 11th. In only the past year, we've faced and we continue to face major crises. We're fighting an evolving pandemic. We're repairing the damage of a severe storm. And we're still a nation of deep and intense divisions. But these tridents stand in perpetuity, telling us that there is strength in unity and there is hope for the future. You can almost hear them whisper. We have a past, we have a present, and we have a future. The strength of this steel is emblematic of our resolve as a people. When we come together and when we stand together, we can overcome anything. When we embrace and we cultivate the richness of our diversity and our differences, we can change the world and we can make it better. And when we embrace compassion, courage, and commitment, we can raise our communities and each other to new heights. That's what it means to be truly united. That's what it means to be an American. To step up, to stand together, and to light the way forward, even in the face of despair. We saw it on 9/11, and we see it whenever ordinary people do extraordinary things, like running into burning buildings or wading into rising floodwaters. Today, we remember those whose lives were cut short 20 years ago. We remember our fire, our police, and our emergency first responders who made the ultimate sacrifice. And we pledge to never forget them. We will always strive to live by their example of caring for their neighbors and for each other. We will always honor, respect, and thank those who follow in their footsteps. And I thank each of you for being here today and for all you do to help your neighbors, help our community in times of celebration and in times of need. So take good care, my friends. And again, it's an honor to be with you today. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I want to say thank you to Jim and to the Houston family and to the leadership of Coatesville Remembers. I, too, am honored to be here with my colleagues, elected officials, and many of you who are here seated in this audience. On that day 20 years ago, I clearly remember a call I received from my brother who asked me the question, "Are you watching television? Do you see what's going on?" Subsequently, there was a visceral anger that I remember feeling, and we shared that anger as we spoke together. In the last 20 years, what we've learned is that anger is not a good foundation for living in community. And so we've found a way to live beyond the initial anger and recognize what it means to cooperate and to live in a way that allows us to manifest the brotherhood and the sisterhood of man. In the last 20 years, we've also learned that appreciation is appropriate. That when men and women run into buildings, when men and women risk their lives so that we can thrive, there is a proper place for saying thank you. There is a proper place for appreciating the sacrifice. And we've discovered that that appreciation and that thank you is not only for those who've lost their lives, but for those who continue to suffer 20 years later as a result of what took place on September the 11th. And so we've also come to appreciate the reality of what it means to be a part of the human family. I've discovered in the last 20 years that there is an appropriateness to lament. I'm grateful to God for the opportunity to lament, because in a world filled with brokenness, there is a place for tears. There is a place for lament. There is a place to remember loss. And I believe that lament is a proper response for what we feel 20 years later and what we felt 20 years ago. Men and women who are motherless, fatherless, children who are left in ways that appear to be orphaned. Lament is an appropriate response. But more than that, I've discovered 20 years later that memories are not facts. Memories are not good or bad. Memories have to be interpreted. and our interpretation of those memories make them either good or bad. Until they are interpreted, they are experiences. And what we've learned in the midst of such memories and their interpretation is that we should remember something that was modeled on that day 20 years ago. We should remember that on that day, in that tragic moment, our humanity became more important than our political party. That on that day, we realized that our coming together was the call of that moment, and that by God's grace, we were able to do that. And right now, there's another call that's extended because we live in the midst of domestic terrorism, aging infrastructures, an opioid epidemic, racial tensions, and there is still yet another moment to come together. And my sincere prayer is that in this moment, we will go back to the model of that day 20 years ago and remember what it means to be champions of the common good, to come together and to heed that call, to manifest a kind of community that will not only heal hearts that are hurting, but honor the glory of God and allow us to live in a meaningful way for the next 20 years. Thank you so much.
At 9:37, hijackers deliberately crashed Flight 77, carrying 58 passengers, 6 crew members, into the Pentagon near Washington, D.C. Please observe a moment of silence. And we would like to invite Coatesville City Councilman Don Folks to give us a few remarks.
Hello, everybody. Wow. It's been rough for me for the last couple of days here. First of all, I want to thank Jim for inviting me to this podium. Since Thursday, I've been crying every day. I know how they felt on that day. First of all, I want to thank you for coming to Coatesville, Pennsylvania, the home of the trees, the home of the steel. Our steel is in a lot of cities. Coatesville is in a lot of cities because of the steel that was made here. I know that volunteers are part of America, and I praise them for what they did here and what they're doing in my city. Thank you for being a part of America. But as I thought, and when I see pictures every day of 9/11 or even here in Chester County, I cry. Because I hurt. I'm so fortunate to have one of the finest fire companies and fire police and police officers in Coatesville. How they rescue people out of windows. How they swim in dirty water. They did that 9/11, and they're doing that today. I pray for the ones that lost their freedom on that day. The ones that are still alive, but they can't get 9/11 out of their heads. They live it every day. That's who I'm praying for. When they get up in the morning and they see an airplane. When they get up in the morning and they're running from a building. That's who I pray for.
Thank you, Don. And we'd like to ask Scott to make a few remarks. Scott Houston.
Well, again, I want to thank everybody for being here. Don't really have any prepared comments on this particular section. This is always a hard day emotionally for a lot of people. We live 9/11 probably more frequently than most people around here. The Tridents and the trees are here every day for us, and it's a day that we hold dear to our hearts. I just want to kind of reflect on a couple things. Really appreciate everybody's comments. I might touch on something that Congresswoman Houlihan said about our collective memory. It's a day that brings us together. It played out on TV. And Commissioner Maxwell said it as well. we were all there, that day. And it was kind of we have social media now. We may have more, future events that bring us, but it was really shocking to watch it all play out. And it really, we all were New Yorkers that day. We were all at the Pentagon, and we were all on Flight 93. It's interesting. I just want to kind of touch, not people know, how these trees, ended up here, or where they came from, or how they're made. So I'm just going to touch a little bit on that process. We were very fortunate to work with the Port Authority of New York, New Jersey, to acquire what we have here, and this is only a small sample of what we have. But nonetheless, these trees were something else. It's the life cycle, the rebirth. It was scrap. It was a project that didn't pan out, or was demolished, or became obsolete, and it probably rolled right through town here on the rail car on its way to the melt shop. Scrapyard gets sorted, and then it was put in the furnaces. And a couple steel workers here today. I know Don is very proud of this, and there's a lot of that teamwork that goes behind it. We know the heats. We know the crews that worked on these. It was a very high profile project that was built right here. 3,000 degrees, that's what it takes to melt steel, and the forces that come to bear on that are tremendous. And there's also the sweat equity to go along with that. I don't know if anybody, probably not, has been in a steel mill. It's not, the most of a friendly of environments, especially in July. But these were built by people. They were built here in Coatesville. Very proud of them. And they were melted in a melt shop, electrodes banging around. It's a great show, 3,000 degrees, what that takes to melt. Poured into an ingot and then rolled. An ingot, is a mold, poured into it, and then it was sent to the rolling mill, where then it was reheated and rolled into big flat shapes. Right? Yeah, if I'm off on anything, let me know. And it was rolled into big flat sheets, and then they have a plasma cutter that would roll along and cut out the shape to whatever you needed it. And again, that goes into the design and the engineering of a building, where they were calling upon Lukens Steel to be the foundation for the building. Trade towers, tallest buildings. Where do you want Lukens Steel? You want it in the foundations, you want it in the base, the first 10 floors. And that's really what was designed here. It went to Pittsburgh, Des Moines, supply chain, and then it ended up on the Hudson. At that time, the site was right along the river. And of course, then, the construction, I believe it was 68, 69. I'm not big on dates, but the process more. And it lived its life in New York. Our work was photographed, highly photogenic buildings. It's interesting to go back and watch movies, and you see the towers, very iconic, and love them or hate them, they were the gleaming towers. And you can see some of the pieces here as well. The iron, they're brown. The buildings looked, silver. That had a cladding on it, an aluminum cladding, and that was a lot of what was falling off the buildings. But they lived in New York for quite some time. Call it 1970, 71. I'm not sure when they exactly opened and when they were full. For a good 30 years. And then, of course, the events of 9/11 changed all that. Of note, there was, not to be forgotten, as well as the bombing in 1993, where terrorists tried to attack the buildings at the garage and ground level, and they figured that wouldn't work. People died that day, and the people in New York in the memorial, we should not forget them as well. Those two events are directly related. They knew they couldn't hit the building low, so then they decided to hit it higher, with planes full of gasoline to try and get the buildings to melt 3,000 degrees. And those days were, obviously of great unity, the collective memory that we all share. It played out in front of us all on TV. Everybody remembers where they were. We encourage people to construct their own meaning about, history, bring your own point of view, bring your own context to do it. But the point is, these are the buildings. Here they are right here. They were in New York, and now they're here. And you can touch them, you can feel them. But sadly, this is where they will be. Brought them back home, and that's kind of the story a little bit. Great effort working with the Port Authority. It started, I think it was October. We were following along with the salvage efforts, and, I'm a big guy, but like 2 big union guys came into my office. And they were like, you know what we put in that? I'm like, yes, sir, I'm well aware. And they're like, we need to bring that home. we need to do something to bring that home. And I'm like, all right, I'll work on it. So that was October. We worked with Joe Pitts, and his office was tremendous in getting us into the hangar, JFK hangar, where the remnants of it were. And we were told, I mean, they walk into this hangar, there are big piles of scrap steel, and you're told that what was left was only about 0.1% of the buildings. So 99.9, 99.8% of the buildings were gone. You know, scrap, and they had the reclamation areas out in Fishkill and other sites to look for remains. Very laborious process and worth all the time and effort and to identify remains. Then what do you do with the steel afterwards? And we had talked to the Port Authority again about the life cycle of steel, where a lot of it went off to be scrapped. A lot of it was held off for memorials, for commemorative events. And at first we were like, well, we just need 3. We want to recreate the lobby, the lobby effect, that the soaring trees and tridents. And so then it was like, well, okay, we'll get you 3, and then it was none, then it was 1, and then it was none, and then they're like, well, how many do you want? And it was a great honor to be a part of that. We worked with the Port Authority of New York, New Jersey, the National September 11th Memorial Museum, the State of New York with their Albany Museum, Hoboken, New Jersey. These places lost hundreds of people. Again, just going to work one day, innocents, non-combatants. I think that's something, they didn't sign up for it. Other people, you sign up, you understand the risks and rewards, but this was an attack on innocent civilians. Anyway, it was an honor to work with them. They shared very personal stories. I believe we've had people come back and talk about it. But they were very interested in who we were, where they came from, and our connection to that. In fact, I think we had visitors yesterday from northern New Jersey, and they were awestruck. And so are we every day. This is history. This is where it happened. And we brought them back home in 2006, I believe. That's when the process began of really moving beyond. You go into the hangar, and the first things you see are bicycles that were left there. And so it's very personal story right when you walk in. It's always a reminder. The process was dealing with trying to get personal artifacts back to families. That was their priority. And we were some of the first people to go in right after that, and to try and be very respectful of everything that was there. But we brought some trees and tridents back. We hope to erect a memorial, as the plans say, to honor the work that went into them, the sacrifices that day, the call to service, and again, you have people that are trapped. It could have been worse. Buildings were supposed to be full that day. I believe it was first Tuesday after Labor Day. So a lot of people we knew in New York were late to that day because they were dropping their kids off at school. It was an interesting day. But 2,977 people died that day. I know there's numbers. 343 is the number that sticks out in my mind, plus additional people who passed away for firemen and other calls of branches of service. But it was an honor to work with everybody. It's an honor to be the custodians of this and to share it and get it out for people in the history. But I wanted to give a little bit of the process about how these trees came about and how they ended up here today, and we hope to get more of them on display permanently. And of course, you can come any day you want. You can come up and access them. So, again, I appreciate everybody's time for being here, and very, very heartfelt remarks. It's an emotional day, and I appreciate you all for being here to take time to remember what happened that day 20 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. That's interesting background. As the National Iron and Steel Heritage Museum, we interpret that story. A little while ago, during some of our speakers, you could hear the grinder over at the plant. The plant began in 1810. It is the longest continuously operating iron and steel company in North America. Iconic buildings were mentioned: Seattle Space Needle, St. Louis Arch, Verrazano Narrows Bridge. You need to say Verrazano Narrows because we had visitors a few days ago from Baltimore, and evidently there's a Verrazano Bridge in Baltimore. So Verrazano Narrows Bridge in New York. On our website, there's a very interesting video of what we call the trees coming home. They're called trees because the New York Times called them trees during construction. So that's where that term came from. My very bright daughter, when she was younger, thought we may be talking about deciduous or coniferous trees. So we say tridents now. The National September 11th Memorial Museum in New York calls them tridents. So we do. But some people don't even know what a trident is. They'll say the forks. So whatever your interpretation, it's the same. These, you can see the welding joint there. These columns were 3 times higher than what you see here. And when we re-erect them over here in the corner, they'll be as tall as the building behind us. So they're very tall. Scott mentioned the first 9 stories, the lobbies in the first office floor. That's where the trident is. Those are the windows for the first office floor. So that's the history. Bringing them home on the video, coming across the George Washington Bridge, the upper deck, and then once we got out of New York, the press releases started going out. By the time the 27 truck caravan carrying 28 pieces came down Route 100 to Exton and then out Route 30, people were lining the streets, and you can see that on the website video. It's very touching. And then when they came down South First Avenue, it was a remarkable day. April 15th, 2010, as I recall. But at any rate, we do plan to re-erect them. They're all numbered, so we know what pieces we had and where they were in New York. So we have the north and east corner of the North Tower. They were A and B under construction. Port Authority owned the buildings. They were 1 and 2, towers 1 and 2, while they were occupied. The day of the disaster, they became known as the North and the South Tower. So we do have the components of the North Tower. All diagrams are very interesting. What they gave us the weights. That's about 30 tons. They gave us the weights and measurements of dimensions of each of the pieces of steel that we have. 304 plates were made here in Coatesville. They were, as Scott said, they were sent to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, Des Moines boxed them into these columns that you see. And so 152 columns went to New York and became the foundation, down to bedrock, of the North and South Tower. So those are my thoughts. Just again, remembering where we were that day, I certainly remember I was listening to KYW, and 8:46, plane hits the North Tower, and it's a sobering thought. And then, because I could only get KYW in my office, I listened to the whole thing, and they reported very, very well. So those are my thoughts, and now I'll take a moment to get a drink because I'm parched, and maybe the band can give us a rendition of something. Thank you. At 9:59, the South Tower of the World Trade Center in New York collapses. Please observe a moment of silence. I'd like to invite City Councilwoman Linda Lavender Norris to give us a few remarks. Linda?
Good morning, all. When I look at the trees, I see resilience, I see love, and I see life. In the city of Coatesville, where the trees were made, there's resiliency, there's love, and there's life. We, as a community, want to honor our first responders. When you run in while others are running out, we appreciate you, we thank you, and we always want to acknowledge you because you represent love, life, and resiliency, and we thank you for it. I take pleasure in standing here just to remember those that have gone on. They were also representatives of love, life, and resiliency. They didn't just stand still. They didn't run in the opposite direction. They ran to help. And it's by the grace of God that we're here remembering them now. And if there was something I could say to those that lost their lives, I would tell them I am ever so grateful. I thank them, and to their families. Your jewel has become our jewel. I would like to just say thank you so much to Jim for inviting me to the podium, and to all our dignitaries. We're grateful, we're one, and by the grace of God, you'll see us rising out of the ashes, just like the trees did. What an awesome time when the trees came into the city. People were crying, taking pictures, just pouring love. They weren't sad, they were pouring love for those that lost their lives, for those that maintained their lives, and for what has come today. 20 years after the fact, the trees are still standing. Just as the city is, just as our country is, and by the grace of God, we'll be so much better for what we've come through. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. At 10:03, passengers aboard United Airlines Flight 93, carrying 40 passengers and crew, launched a counterattack on hijackers aboard their plane to try to seize control of the aircraft. The plane crashes into an empty field in Somerset County, Pennsylvania. Please observe a moment of silence. I'd like to invite Bill Shaw, the Executive Director of Life Transforming Ministries, to the podium. We have some poems that we've read from time to time on September 11th, and Bill's going to choose some of those selections. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you. As Jim said, I have a couple poems here that were written in response to the events of that day and the aftermath. The first is called simply 9/11, a poem by Robert Pinsky. We adore images. We like the spectacle of speed and size, the working of prodigious systems. So on television, we watched the terrible spectacle, repetitiously gazing until we were sick, not only of the sight of our prodigious systems working turned against us, but of the very systems of our watching. The date became a word, an anniversary, that we inscribed with meanings, who keep so few. More likely to name an airport for an actor or athlete than 1st of May or 4th of July. In the movies, we dream up our captured heroes, tell the interrogator their commanding officer's name is Colonel Donald Duck. He writes it down. Code of a lowbrow memory, so assuredly it's nearly aristocratic. Some say the doomed firefighters, before they hurried into the doomed towers, wrote their social security numbers on their forearms. Easy to imagine them kidding about it a little, as if they were filling out some workday form. Will Rogers was a Cherokee, a survivor of expropriation, a roper, a card, for some a hero. He had turned 16 the year that Frederick Douglass died. Douglass was 12 when Emily Dickinson was born. Is even Donald half forgotten? Who are the Americans? Not a people by blood or religion. As it turned out, the donated blood not needed, except as meaning. And on the other side that morning, the guy who shaved off all his body hair and screamed the name of God, his God, with his box cutter in his hand. Oh, Americans, as Marion Moore would say, whence is our courage? Is what holds us together a gluttonous, dreamy, thriving? Whence our being? In the dark roots of our music, impudent and profound? Or in the 18th century clarities and mystic Masonic totems of the founders, the eye of the pyramid watching over us, hexagram of stars protecting the eagle's head, from terror of pox, from plague and radiation? And if they blow up the Statue of Liberty, then the survivors might likely in grief, terror, and excess build a dozen more, or produce a catchy song about it. Its meaning as beyond meaning as those symbols, or Ray Charles singing America the Beautiful. Alabaster cities, amber waves, purple majesty. The backup singers in sequins and high heels for a performance, or in the studio in sneakers and headphones. Engineers at soundboards, musicians, all concentrating. Faces as grave with purpose as the harbor statue herself. This poem is called Strangers by Lucille Lang Day. I didn't know the man in black pants who plunged headfirst from the top of the North Tower, or the young mother trapped behind a locked door on the 87th floor. I never met the couple crushed in their final embrace and stuffed into one body bag, or the fire chief quickly buried under tons of concrete. Steel, glass, ash. Nor did I ever say hello to the blonde woman who called her husband to ask what she should tell the pilot standing beside her at the back of the plane. I never shared coffee with the 6'4" executive who said, if we're going to crash into something, let's not let it happen. Our best chance is to fight. Yet I have felt the sun on their lips. Yet I have felt sun on their skin and tasted wine on their lips. I have run using the long muscles of their legs and felt air rush into their lungs, their hearts pumping in my chest. And they have combed my hair each morning, tasted cereal from my bowl, and held my children in their arms. At night, they have watched stars shimmer through my eyes. Now, they've returned to earth and air, but I still feel them, stirring inside of me, walking the long corridors of my brain, searching for something irretrievable, precious, still there. One final poem really was not written in response to 9/11, 2001. It was written centuries before. And I think in response to that day, there's some great wisdom for this day. It's recorded in the book of Psalms. God is our refuge and strength, always ready to help in times of trouble. So we will not fear when earthquakes come and the mountains crumble into the sea. Let the oceans roar and foam. Let the mountains tremble as the waters surge. A river brings joy to the city of our God. The sacred home of the Most High God dwells in that city, cannot be destroyed. From the very break of day, God will protect it. The nations are in chaos, and their kingdoms crumble. God's voice thunders, and the earth melts. The Lord of heaven's armies is here among us. The God of Israel is our fortress. Come, see the glorious works of the Lord. See how he brings destruction upon the world. He causes wars to end throughout the earth. He breaks the bow, and he snaps the spear. He burns the shields with fire. Be still and know that I am God. I will be honored by every nation. I will be honored throughout the world. The Lord of heaven's armies is here among us. The God of Israel is our fortress. Peace be with you.
Thank you, Bill. The History of the Airplane by Lawrence Ferlinghetti. And the Wright brothers said they thought they had invented something that could make peace on Earth when their wonderful flying machine took off at Kitty Hawk into the kingdom of birds. But the Parliament of Birds was freaked out by this man-made bird and fled to heaven. Then the famous Spirit of St. Louis took off eastward and flew across the big pond with Lindy at the controls in his leather helmet and goggles, hoping to see the doves of peace. But he did not, even though he circled Versailles. Then the famous flying Clipper took off in the opposite direction and flew across the terrific Pacific, but the Pacific doves were frightened by this strange amphibious bird and hilled in the Orient sky. Then the famous Flying Fortress took off bristling with guns and testosterone to make the world safe for peace and capitalism, but the birds of peace were nowhere to be found before or after Hiroshima. And so then clever men built bigger and faster flying machines, and these great man-made birds with jet plumage flew higher than any real birds and seemed about to fly into the sun and melt their wings like Icarus crashed to the earth. And the Wright brothers were long forgotten in the high-flying bombers that now began to visit their blessings on various third worlds, all the while claiming they were searching for doves of peace. And they kept flying and flying until they flew right into the 21st century. And then one fine day, a third world struck back and stormed the great planes that flew them into the beating heart of skyscraper America, where there were no aviaries and no parliaments of doves, and in blinding flash, America became part of the scorched earth of the world. And the wind of ashes blows across the land, and for one long moment in eternity, there is chaos and despair. And buried loves and voices, cries and whispers fill the air everywhere.
Ivy, 58. On your next birthday, you'll be 58. You ready? Clock of ages. I'll give you two. Shoot. 1, 2.
I Saw You Walking by Deborah Garrison. I saw you walking through Newark Penn Station in your shoes of white ash. At the corner of my nervous glance, your dazed passage first forced me away, tracing the crescent berth you'd give a drunk, a lurcher, a nuzzling all comers with ill will and his stench, but not this one, not today. One shirt arms sheared clean from the shoulder, the whole bare limb wet with muscle and shining dimly pink, the other full sheathed in cotton, Brooks Brothers type. The cuff had yet buttoned to the wrist, a parody of careful dress, preparedness, so that you would not roll up your sleeves yet this morning when your suit jacket. Here are the pants, dark gray, the subtle stripe is worn by men like you on ordinary days, and briefcase, you've none. Reverse commuter come from the pit with nothing to carry but your life. Were torn from you as your life was not. Your face seemed to be walking, leading your body north, through the age of the face, blank and ashen, passing forth and away from me. Was unclear, the sandy brown crown of your hair, powdered white like your feet, but underneath, not yet gray, 47, 48, the age of someone's father, and I trembled for your luck, for your broad dusted back, half-shirted, walking away. I should have dropped to my knees to thank God you were alive. Oh my God, in whom I don't believe. At 10:28, the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York collapses. All 16 acres of the World Trade Center site are in ruins. A rescue and recovery effort begins. Please observe a moment of silence.
At 10:28, the North Tower collapses. At this time, we would like to remember the 2,977 people who died on September 11, 2001. Let us remember the 343 firefighters and 71 law enforcement police officers who gave their lives that day, selflessly rushing to the aid of others. Let us also remember the 55 military personnel who died in the attack on the Pentagon, and one law enforcement officer on United Flight 93. There were 353 non-U.S. citizens from over 90 countries, including 67 from the United Kingdom, 47 from the Dominican Republic, and 41 from India. But let us take time to remember those connected to Chester County who died that day, as I read their names and we ring a bell and have a moment of silence. Richard Stewart. Richard was from the Kennett area and attended Upland Country Day, where he played ice hockey. Becoming the school's single-season scoring leader with 42 goals, a record that lasted 13 years. He was a bond trader at Cantor Fitzgerald on the 104th floor of One World Trade Center. Christopher Clark. Christopher was a bond trader for Sandler, O'Neill, and Partners on the 104th floor of Two World Trade Center. He was born in Devon and grew up in Villanova before attending St. Joe's Prep in 1986. He was the husband of Casey Connors and the son of Janet and Frank Clark. Michael Horrocks. Michael was the quarterback of the football team and a graduate of Westchester University. He was a United States Marine before becoming first officer on American Flights 175. He was the husband of Miriam, and his children are Krista and Mick. Kevin Marlowe. Kevin was a graduate of Henderson High School in Westchester, was an associate director of equity sales and trading for Sandler O'Neill Partners on the 104th floor of Two World Trade Center. He made cameo appearances in the Jay Leno Show, Woody Allen movie, and prior to 9/11, he completed filming of a reality TV show on WD Network. He was the son of Dennis Marlowe and Rosemary Meyer. George Smith. George was a graduate of Phoenixville High School and attended Allentown College. He was a deacon of Cornerstone Evangelical Free Church in Kimberton, and he worked on the 97th floor of Two World Trade Center as a senior business analyst with SunGuard Asset Management Systems. His parents were Raymond Smith and Georgia Jackson. Please observe a moment of silence. We would also like to recognize Chester Countyans associated with the post-9/11 rescue and salvage effort. Chief John DeMarco, Upper Euclid Township Police. Detective Thomas Jones, Upper Euclid Township Police. Mr. Lou Angeli, firefighter, Kennett Square. Mr. James Thompson, New York City firefighter. Mr. Kevin Chandler, VA Fire Department. Andrew Englander, Elverson EMS. Detective Sergeant William Cahill, Westtown, East Goshen Police Department. Corporal Timothy Hubbard, Westtown, East Goshen Police Department. Detective Robert Buchanan, Westtown, East Goshen Police Department. And Dan Odine, American Red Cross. Again, we can't thank you enough for the courage and inspiration that you provide to all of us. But this concludes our program. I want to thank you again for attending today and taking the time out to remember with us. I know it's hard, but I really appreciate everybody coming, and especially their words. And again, thank you very much. Remember the people that lost their lives and the people that continue to serve us today. Thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry, we have one more musical, God Bless America. Thank you.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairie, to the oceans, white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home. To mark the ending of our commemoration today, I invite you all to sing another round of God Bless America in unison. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairie,